Hey everybody, welcome to Daniel Davis road trip version. I'm still in London. We'll be here all week. This is a very, very complicated situation, and for those who want to make it simple and nice and neat, sorry, you're gonna be disappointed because it's not going to be that way. Which could go anywhere from we dodged a bullet to holy crap, we are in all-out war now with no end in sight. All that's on the table and possible right now, based on the actions that we have initiated. Now what? What is Iran going to do? I want to look at some of the possibilities that they could do here. Talk about some of the pros and cons, because there's no easy answer for Iran here at all. They're in a very difficult position. They've been in a difficult position. They're used to being in a difficult position, and this is no exception. But we need to also understand that this is not going to be a simple thing. See, here's what the U.S. wants to do. We want to have had this big bomb that Trump claims was, all these B-2s, the bunker busters, et cetera. They were spectacularly successful. By the way, let's just talk, practicalities right off the top. Trump has no earthly idea whether the bombs were successful or not. He knows they hit the target that they were sent to, but what they did under the ground, nobody in America can know. None of our intelligence can know. Israeli intelligence can't know. Only the Iranians, who will do some kind of an on-site, under-the-ground examination, will know, and they're certainly not going to announce whatever happened. Also, bear in mind that the Iranians claimed before the fact that they had already moved a lot of their nuclear material, whether that's the centrifuges, the reprocessed uranium, or some other kind of components we don't know, but they claimed beforehand that had been removed before the bombs started falling. We showed you some images yesterday from Maxar Technologies, some satellite imagery that indicated that probably was the case, because there was a whole bunch of vehicles that were seen outside of there in the days just before this bombing started. So it's plausible that that's true, meaning that we may not have destroyed their capability to make a bomb. And that's even assumed that the bombs went that far down. So we don't know any of those things. So it is way too early to claim spectacular success, which the U.S. wants. But what we want, though, is for the act of the bombing itself to put Iran back into a container and say, all right, stop doing whatever we don't want you to do, and we'll just say you didn't have nuclear capacity anymore. It's been set back for years, and now just do what we want. Have a negotiated settlement according to the terms that we'll dictate to you, and then cool, everything will be fine. None of our troops will get hit. Nobody will die. We'll continue to be the dominant power. And I'll look cool. That's what Trump is thinking. That's what he'd like to happen. Will it happen that way? I doubt it. But I can't preclude anything, because there's a whole range of options, and all of them are possible. There's some plausibility. Let's look at a few of them. First of all, they could do nothing directly in response to the United States, but continue to keep hitting Israel, because they see that's happening, and they have the capacity to do that. It's likely they can sustain this for a period of time, maybe even a long time. And there's evidence that Israel may not be able to sustain that for a long time. So they could say, all right, we don't want to bring any action from the United States. It's tough enough with the attacks they do continue to get from Israel itself. So let's just maintain what we've got here, because we can endure what we're getting from Israel, but we think that we have enough resources and ammunition to actually outlast Israel. So let's keep causing harm to Israel, because as much as we're being hit, they're being hit and harmed too. And Netanyahu, they may calculate, can't get into a war of attrition politically or any other way. So they may do that, and then they may just bolster and complain and say, we're going to get you at a time of our choosing, and we'll revenge and all that, but then not actually take us under fire. That's an entire possibility too, because they may calculate that may, if not prevent, forestall any additional attacks from the United States. Problem with that course of action is that Trump also said in the aftermath of the first bombing that if Iran doesn't seek peace, then more will come. So that option might not be very high on their list, because there's nothing to gain from it. They may get hit anyway. And if you're going to get hit anyway, and it could be more withering fire, then you may calculate, well, then we better take some action first and hit something while we still have the capacity, because America could come and could further degrade their capacity alongside what Israel's trying to do on a regular basis as it is. The next thing is that they may try and hit a symbolic U.S. target, like they did after the Soleimani assassination by Trump in 2020. They may say, all right, we're going to hit something. We're not going to kill any Americans, but we're going to hit symbolic and say, yeah, we did, because that placates the people at home, et cetera. But we might not draw any further ire from the U.S. That's what happened last time. I doubt that would work this time, because if anything else gets hit after what Trump has already done, what he's already threatened, I doubt seriously that he would do what he did in 2020, which, by the way, I said was a good idea. I gave him credit for not carrying it further after our al-Assad base was hit in response to that, because no Americans were killed. He didn't take it further. We avoided a war then. I doubt he'll do that this time, because now he's feeling pretty cocky, pretty confident, and I doubt he would withdraw with anything American gets hit here because of what he's already said. Another thing that they could do is that the Iranians could say, all right, you know what? We don't have anything to gain by holding back, because you'd already said we're going to get hit again anyway. So right now, I'm going to hit some of your ships, maybe in the ports in Bahrain. We're going to hit some of your air bases in Qatar. We're going to hit some of your army bases in Iraq and in Syria, etc. We know from their ballistic missiles what they had been doing in Israel against the very best that the West and the U.S. has to offer. They will get some fruit, some percentage of those, probably a meaningful percentage, will get through and will cause death and destruction of Americans here. And then, of course, now it's game on. And so the con of that is that now then, all the constraints are off, and then the U.S. would do all kinds of Trump, let me clarify, would probably launch all kinds of things on top of that. But now then, you can't even have the pretense that you're not at war with Iran, and you've got all kinds of domestic issues. More on that in a second. They could also do a different tack. They could say, you know what? We're going to take that negotiated deal. We're gonna take what's offered on the table, and we're going to say, all right, tell you what, we'll get all the fighting. We'll get the Israeli fire office stopped. We'll get the American fire office stopped. We'll forestall any more from coming in. We'll just say we'll play nice. We'll agree with whatever. But because they apparently have spirited away all this reprocessing stuff, they have taken centrifuges elsewhere, they can go places that nobody even knows about, and they can continue on. And now then they could covertly race to a bomb on top. So they may calculate that we'll use deception to make Trump think that we're going to do something. Meanwhile, we're going to go this other path. Or they may just say, you know what, it's just not worth it. We're going to try this. I doubt that would happen either. I doubt that they would genuinely have a negotiated settlement for a couple of reasons. One, Libya. Too many people keep wanting to say this is a positive thing, but the recipient country, that's not a good deal. Because if Iran makes this deal, and especially if they do what's being asked of them, which is to curtail or eliminate their long-range missile program and their nuclear power capacity, then they completely disarm. And now then Iran or Israel, the U.S., anyone else can completely obliterate them, and there's nothing they can do. So the long-range missiles right now, which are causing significant damage in Israel, they would lose that too. So then they would be utterly defenseless against an attack. That would be equivalent to national suicide. I can't even imagine they would do that. There's certainly plenty of hardliners within the Mullah community, within the IRGC. I doubt they'll go down that path either. So that leaves us into a situation then with no good alternatives, because we have to look at this from Iran's perspective. I know so many in the West don't want to, but if you want to have any chance at having a good outcome, you must. Because I think that we have now, past tense, put Iran in a no-win position to where they don't have any either incentive, motivation, or logic to do nothing. Because all these options you keep seeing, they have negative outcomes for Iran. But the one that gives them the most potential to even have a theoretical hope of keeping the U.S. at bay is going to be to launch an attack against the United States while they can, to cause severe harm at home, because they see that there is division within the president's own party in the United States. They see that there is a lot of people unhappy about the prospect, especially on the other side, and just in a population at all, about getting into another Middle East war. They can see that Trump would have incentive not to get that done, because he literally ran on a platform not to start any more dumb wars, which he'd been doing since 2016. And now he has already unilaterally started one in contravention of the U.S. Constitution and the 1973 War Powers Act, designed specifically to prevent these kinds of imperial overreach, where a chief executive on his own authority can plunge the U.S. into war. And Iran may calculate, we're going to exacerbate that and know America's proclivities not to like that kind of stuff, and start something and hope that we can weather the storm. There's some plausibility to that. That is a path that has some logic to it. Take a look at the Houthis. What have they done for the past decade? They underwent all the stuff that Saudi Arabia unleashing them with American help from 2015 onward. That they tried to destroy the Houthis. They never succeeded in doing it. They finally outlasted Saudi Arabia. Then with the 10/7 attacks in 2023, the Houthis started helping the Palestinian people by attacking Israel. And then now that unleashed a new round of attacks from Israel against the Houthis. And then later the United States with the Red Sea and all that. Then we started doing it too. We weren't successful under Biden administration. Trump administration tried to reprise it, realized that it was going to be way too expensive to even try, and it wasn't going to succeed. So they stopped doing that. And yet they still are there. They still are active. The Hamas, after 2 full years, or almost 2 full years of attacks by Israel, they still are not defeated. They still are quite viable, even though they've endured unimaginable destruction and death. Yet they are still a viable force that will not be quelled. You have Hezbollah in the south, or in the south of Lebanon, in the north of Israel, and they're not gone anywhere either. They had withering devastation to their senior leaders, and they went to ground. They're still there. They haven't gone anywhere. They are licking their wounds, and they, I assure you, are planning for future revenge attacks. So that still exists as well. You curtail them for the moment. And now that we want to think that Iran, this 90 million people population, this massive country, and all the capability they have, we think that just one round of bombs is going to make them stop and go down. See, they could calculate that the least damaging course of action they could take, the one that has the most possible logic for success, is to go into and hit the U.S. hard and draw the U.S. into a war that we can't sustain. Because we're already trying to do stuff in Ukraine. And so our arsenals have been badly, desperately depleted because of 3.5 years of war in Ukraine. And now all this 18, 19 months in Israel against the Hamas, again, badly depleted. Now Israel with the war so far in Iran. Now then you want to add us to it. We don't have that many missiles, folks. We don't have that many offensive missiles. We don't have that many defensive missiles, air defense interceptors. So Iran may calculate that their best chance and hope for survival is to expand the war to the United States. And there's some logic behind that. So we're going to have to wait and see how that's going to work out here. But Iran could well say, hey, we're going to have to suck down some near to medium term real damage and harm, try to weather this storm, and outlast Israel and the United States. And it's possible that they could do that. I have no idea, because there's pros and cons that go with everything, and no one can figure out what the mullets are going to choose on their own. But I worry about that one, because in my military analysis, taking off any kind of emotional hats, that is the one that I think has the most plausible success for Iran, because the other courses of action have bigger downsides in my view. But that's just one man's opinion. We'll have to wait and see how that's going to work out. But let's take a look now at seeing where are things now with the United States. There was a lot of, so this is Monday, and there was lots of news in the United States. They always have the Sunday shows where all the leaders go on some of the major television networks and talk about what the things that are happening, newsmakers, et cetera. And yesterday was no exception. And this was one of the topics front and center. And Secretary of State Rubio and Vice President Vance made a number of statements. President Trump made some statements. Members of Congress made some statements. And all of this just mixes the stuff up and unfortunately continues this trend to, what the hell is our objective anyway? What is our plan? You know, if you've been watching our channel for any amount of time, my biggest gripe for the United States going back many, many years, going all the way back to the Bush administration, what they did in the Iraq War, the Afghanistan War, through all those administrations, Biden in the Russia-Ukraine War, and now Trump here, is that we don't ever count what the hell we're going to do next. We take an action, a military action, and then we don't know what comes next. If plan A doesn't work, if our preferred action doesn't happen, if the other side doesn't do what we want, then we're like, yeah, what do we do? Well, you've already embarked on a course of action, and now that you don't have any resourced and logical plan to what comes next, so it's just ad hoc, and you're just like, I don't know, what should we do now? That's kind of where we've been as a nation across all administrations and where we are right now. Let me give you a few examples. Here is, let's see who's first up here. This is Secretary Rubio He says that he was asked flatly, is the United States at war with Iran? I mean, all we did was bomb them, but his curious answer.
Are we now at war with Iran?
No, we're not. This is not a war against Iran. This is very simple. 67 days ago, the President of the United States sent the Iranians a letter, and it said, you're not going to have nuclear weapons. You're not going to have a militarized nuclear program. Let's negotiate. I want to do this diplomatically. I want to do this peacefully. They tried to play him along the way they've played every American president for the last 35 years. And, the president told them, if we don't get a deal, which is what he wanted, then I'll have to handle it differently. And that's what he did last night. He handled it differently. But that was an Iranian choice. We didn't make that choice. They did. By playing games with Donald Trump, they made a huge mistake. And President Trump acted last night. And I think the world today is safer and more stable than it was 24 hours ago. And a bunch of these countries putting out statements condemning us, privately, they all agree with us that this needed to be done. They got to do what they got to do for, their own public relations purposes. But the only people in the world that are unhappy about what happened in Iran last night is the regime in Iran.
Yeah, well, we'll see about that. Whether they're the only ones in the world that are unhappy, I doubt that. That the world is now safer than it was 24 hours ago. Decidedly not. But let's take a look at that initial statement. Are we at war with Iran? No, he confidently asserted. Okay, you just bombed a country significantly on top of what we're already supplying through the proxy of using Israel to bomb Iran, and you want to say, no, we're not at war here. See, that's weird, because consider, let's say, I don't know, we'll just pick this one random example. December 7th, 1941, Japan bombs Pearl Harbor. Now, how foolish would it look for them to come out and say, we're not at war with the United States? We tried to do this through negotiations. We tried to tell them we needed to lift the oil embargo and some of these other sanctions that they had. As long as they do that now, we're still going to be fine. We're going to be okay. But you're not at war with the U.S. We don't have to do this. No, world's a safer place. You see how absurd that would be. You just hit our bases and you killed our people. We just launched 3 nuclear sites. Proactively went in there, even though America was not at risk of anything. There was no threats against America. We went in and attacked them. And now we just want to say we're not at war with them because we don't want to be at war. That's the way we want it to be. We want it to be able to go and destroy things in another country, kill a bunch of their people. We don't really care. I actually haven't seen any casualty figures. I don't know how many may or may not have been killed, but we did attack, the core of their system with these weapons at the nuclear facilities. And now they have vowed revenge, of course. They have vowed response, crippling response. They've said unimaginable, whatever. We'll see what actually happens. But to just say we're not at war with them is kind of wishful thinking. The other thing that's troubling about his comments there was his flippant attitude that, hey, we told him what to do, and they didn't do it. So there's no international law involved at that at all. There is no justification in the United Nations Charter, the U.S. Constitution, U.S. law, international law. Nothing gives any country the right to say, I don't want you to have this certain policy or this action, so I'm going to go and destroy it. And then I gave you a chance. I gave you 60 days. That's what he's saying. Listen to me carefully, especially all you who are pro-Americans. That is empire by definition. You can say it's not all day long, and you can wave the flag and all this, and you can do that. It won't be accurate. And despite what Rubio says there, the rest of the world does see that, because your words that you just said and the actions that precipitated it just validated that is empire. That we told you what to do, you didn't do it, so now we bombed you to compel compliance. Argue with me. Tell me that's not the case. Tell me that's not the case. Did we get authorization from the UN Security Council? No. Did we get authorization from the U.S. Congress? No. Were we attacked? No. There's no justification for it. Yet that's what we're doing, and we're continuing on with that. But Rubio wasn't finished. He actually said and wants to continue on saying that, look, we were forced into this.
What we want now is to ensure that Iran never has nuclear weapons. If what they want is a civil nuclear program where they have power plants like a lot of other countries in the world have, They can do that. That's the deal that's been offered to them. They rejected it. They played us. They tried to play us, I should say. They wouldn't respond to our offers. They disappeared for 10 days. And now, the president had to take action as a response.
No, the president didn't have to take action as a response. That's again, that's actually more like a kind of a mafia kind of deal. Hey man, I told you, here's the deal. You didn't listen to my deal, my offer, so I had to take action. You know what I'm saying? I mean, that's only a slight exaggeration. Maybe it's not any exaggeration. That's again from his own mouth. You just heard him there. Play it back if you want to listen to it again with that lens on, because that's exactly what he said. We told you this is what we wanted you to do. We gave you warning. You didn't listen, so we had to take action. Yeah, no, we didn't have to take action. Vice President wanted to jump in on that too, and he's wanting to say what the American goal is. And just listen to this, because it's he's going to contradict himself in the span of about one sentence.
I can say to the American people with great confidence that they are much further away from a nuclear program today than they were 24 hours ago. That was the objective of the mission, to destroy that Fordo nuclear site and, of course, do some damage to the other sites as well. But we feel very confident that the Fordo nuclear site was substantially set back, and that was our goal.
Okay, wait a minute. Was the goal to substantially set back or to destroy the nuclear program? Because it seems like you're trying to say both at the same time. But even in your own admission there, it may have substantially set back. You saw, I think we showed either yesterday or the day before, the Iranian foreign minister, Rakchi, who said, listen, you can hit some of these sites. He said this before the attack. You can hit some of these sites. But one, we've moved a lot of the material out. But number two, we've got the intelligence and the information and the knowledge. We can continue. We can replace whatever's lost. So unless you want to go in and wipe out all the Iranians, everyone, all the scientific people, which is, of course, by itself a violation of international law to go after civilians. But unless you want to go and wipe them all out, this will do nothing but delay. That's not destroy. That's just saying that we're going to push it back to another day, which means that you are setting yourself up for perpetual conflict. Because if you don't even give the possibility for the other side to have any option other than getting a nuclear weapon, you have now provided every incentive for them to go to a nuclear weapon. That's what I've been warning about for months, actually for years. And specifically in this current situation, I've been warning that you could push Iran to the very thing you claim to want to prevent, which is them getting a nuclear weapon. They didn't have one. The U.S. intelligence estimates show that. The United Nations IAEA inspectors validated that right before this stuff happened. Actually, some of the bombing had started, and they still said, as of that time they talked about it, it was still not going to a nuclear weapon. And yet we bombed anyway. So now then, it's entirely possible, may even be probable, that whether through overt or covert means that they say, all right, we're going to race to a bomb. It could be that they're going to say, all right, we'll make a deal, we'll talk, whatever, and then like Trump did, but he pretended that he was looking for negotiations and he wanted to get peace of chance, but he was actually just providing cover so that we could get all the pieces in place to bomb them. That Iran could play for the same playbook and say, okay, we'll have a deal, we'll stop fighting, and then covertly go to bomb. And then one day, we're all the world shocked by seeing information that there has been a nuclear test somewhere in an underground facility in Iran. That's the more probable outcome right now. Well done, Vice President. Let's see. The next thing. It's and by the way, we want to have taken all this action, and we just don't want there to be any consequence.
Can you say definitively that Iran's nuclear program has now been destroyed?
Well, John, I don't want to get into the sensitive intelligence here, but we know that we set the Iranian nuclear program back substantially last night. Whether it's years or beyond that, we know it's going to be a very long time before Iran can even build a nuclear weapon if they want to. But I actually think that raises the most important question. The president talked about this last night. We want Iran to give up their nuclear weapons program peacefully. If they're willing to choose the smart path, they're certainly going to find a willing partner in the United States to dismantle that nuclear weapons program. But if they decide they're going to attack our troops, if they decide they're going to continue to try to build a nuclear weapon, then we are going to respond to that with overwhelming force. So really what happens next is up to the Iranians.
Yeah, we want to do this, and we just don't want anything to happen. And listen, Iran, Dude, just trust us, man. This all you got to do is get rid of all this stuff, and then you'll find a good partner with the United States, like Libya did, like Iran has in the past when they had tried to cooperate in the JCPOA, and they had these very stringent conditions placed on them in the expectation that we would live up to our expectations, and then only to have that thrown up and torn into the trash when President Trump came into office in his first term. Like that, you mean? That's what the trust you want to build. See, here's the problem. We don't want our actions in the past to have consequences. We don't want Trump tearing up that deal in 2018 to have any consequences. We don't want this shredding of the trust that anyone had in us, and especially when we just said we were doing those negotiations and they were all clearly a cover for preparing for the military action. Who's going to trust that? Don't you see how this works against us? Even if there was some in Iran that may say, let's consider a negotiated deal, they would be laughed out of the place or kicked out of their office because they're like, are you stupid? What? How could we trust Iran, the United States or the West or Israel with our lives and just hand it over and hope that we don't get Gaddafi? You see that. Our past actions have ramifications now, which makes any kind of peaceful resolution to this or even a minimization of what's happened nearly impossible. We have provided the other side there every reason to not listen to a word we say, to trust nothing that we say, and the only option left is to kill Americans. That's why I told you at the outset of this episode that I think that the most logical and self-preserving course of action, despite what Vance wants to argue there, is for them to do exactly against what he said, which is to attack our people. We now have a crosshair on our backs right now, and the logic on the other side, because of our past actions, that could now precipitate the deaths of American troops here, and then now put the president in a position to where almost the only thing he can do is to expand the war. Because I don't see that's even a theoretical possibility that Iran could act on that, and that Trump could go, yeah, this is too expensive. All right, that was a dumb idea. All right, yeah, let's just get this off the table. He's never shown any evidence to do that. And I don't think that he would here too. And then that would just be sucking us deeper into a war and causing even more death, more destruction of Americans, more loss of money, all the bad things that happened in 2003, but much worse because now that the stakes are much higher. So well done on that one. One other thing that Vance said too, I want to talk about is that, we don't want this to get into a protracted war. So here's now he's admitting our weakness and again, unwittingly handing over to Iran a potential path to what they can do instead, because if you do this is what we don't want.
The president has been very clear that we are not interested in protracted conflicts in the Middle East, but there's a question about how do you achieve peace, and we believe the way that you achieve peace is through strength. We took a very narrow and limited approach to destroying the Iranian nuclear program, John. That's what the president did, and I think that, more than anything, is going to ensure peaceful resolution in that region of the world. You can't be weak. You can't sit there and allow the Iranians to achieve a nuclear weapon, John, and expect that's going to lead to peace. It would lead to absolutely disastrous military conflict all over the Middle East. We don't want that. Our Gulf Arab nation allies don't want that. Israel doesn't want that. And it's one of the few issues, frankly, that unites the Arabians to the Israelis is none of them want the Iranians to get a nuclear weapon because they know that it would lead to the opposite of peace.
Okay, you know what? That's actually probably accurate. The Gulf Arab states don't want Iran to have a nuclear weapon. They don't want conflict in the region. That part is true. But to sit there and say, so from the first of it, we've taken this limited action. That's only limited in your mind. It ain't limited on the reception into that, I assure you. And then to admit that we don't want a protected war, Israel doesn't want a protracted war. Yeah, no kidding. I know you don't. You want this demonstration of power to do what it doesn't do to anybody else in the Middle East, whether that's the Houthis, whether that's the Hamas, whether that's Hezbollah. You don't want it to. It didn't work on any of those. It has temporarily on Hezbollah, but as you heard me say earlier, that's a temporary condition. It hadn't worked at all on the other two. They're still actively fighting. And then you think that Iran, the so-called head of the octopus that was in charge of all these other tentacles, you think that it's going to work on them? That just one round of bombing is going to work? Yeah, almost certainly it's not going to. I mean, just use some common sense here. But you have admitted that we don't want to get into a protracted war, so that's the concern that we have. Ergo, they now have motivation to go, Well, let's do the thing you don't want the most. And who else doesn't want that? Benjamin Netanyahu doesn't want it. He definitely doesn't want it. And he said, listen, this is what he said, because he hardly ever actually is accurate with what he says anyway, but gives a version of what he wants to be true. It says Israel is very close to reaching its goals in Iran and will avoid a war of attrition. Yeah, I'm sure that's what you want. You want to avoid a war of attrition because, as I pointed out, you can't sustain this. Yeah, I don't know how you're going to continue to sustain the wars you had already, but now that this, what are you going to do? And close to achieving your goals? You said your goals were the destruction of the Iranian nuclear program, and you strongly implied it was regime change. But now then, what we've even said is this has harmed their nuclear weapons program. So are you telling me, Netanyahu, that now your objective is to just push it back? So we're going to maintain the problems with Iran, unlike what Naftali Bennett said. We don't want to destroy the head of the octopus, etc. Well, now that you're not going to destroy the head of the octopus, you're just going to have wounded it again. All the tentacles are still in place, by the way, and that's close to attaining your objectives. I mean, that's nonsense. It's completely opposite your objectives. But then, so you heard the Secretary of State, Vice President of the United States say that we have limited objectives. We just want them to not have their nuclear program. We want them to have an opportunity for peace. And then on top of that, you have the President of the United States tweeting out this, or it's Truth Social. It's not politically correct to use the term regime change, but if the current Iranian regime is unable to make Iran great again, why wouldn't there be a regime change? So there's that. So now then, and I showed you, let's see, who was it? The Newt Gingrich, former House Speaker, who's now on Fox all the time. He was saying that the other day, that Netanyahu and Trump are going to be the Reagan and Thatcher. They're going to redo all this stuff. You have Lindsey Graham, who outright expressly called for regime change. And remember when I told you that, when I showed you that clip from him a few days ago? I said, this is his golfing buddy. This is Trump's golfing buddy. Now you see the golfing buddy putting out on his social media post here, regime change. What's wrong with that? Well, some in his party, in the president's party, actually do have a problem with that. One of which, it used to be one of his most boisterous supporters, in Marjorie Taylor Greene. She says some things about, it's a big long thing, I won't read it all, but she said her thoughts on bombing Iran. The key part I want to highlight here are neocon warmongers beat the drums of war and act like Billy badasses going to war in countries most Americans have never seen and can't find on a map, but never find the courage to go to war, and the actual terrorists who do kill Americans, invade our land, and make billions do it day after day, year after year. I'm 51 years old. I'm Gen X. I've watched our country go to war in foreign lands, on foreign causes, on behalf of foreign interests for as long as I can remember. I was in the 10th grade when Desert Storm started, and my father before me was sent to Vietnam, another senseless foreign war. America is $37 trillion in debt, and all of these foreign wars have cost Americans trillions and trillions of dollars that never benefited any American. American troops have been killed and forever torn apart physically and mentally for regime change, foreign wars, and for military industrial-based profits. I'm sick of it. I can easily say I support nuclear-armed Israel's right to defend themselves, and also say at the same time I don't want to fight or fund nuclear-armed Iran's wars, nor any other country for that matter. And so that's Marjorie Taylor Greene, who's a big supporter of Trump and a big MAGA person. She's saying, I'm tired of this. And you had Tucker Carlson saying, I'm tired of this. You had Steve Bannon saying, I'm tired of this. Many others are. Right now, they're just tired of it. But if this goes the bad direction, see, this is why I told you again at the outset that it is the logic that Iran could say, even though it's going to result in some near-term real pain, going down the path here to cause problem for Trump at home could politically undermine him so that he gets out of this war. I assure you that the United States got out of Vietnam because of the political subversion within the United States against President Johnson at that time. And then Nixon came in and finished the deal to get out. But Johnson didn't even stand for re-election because he was getting undermined by his own base, and people were sick and tired of that war because it was dumb, and they realized we didn't need to be fighting it. We certainly didn't need to be dying. You add one now for Trump when nobody would believe that we needed this war. They don't already. And then now Americans start getting killed, and then you go deeper into it. the absolute key thing that so many people voted for him not to do, not to start another regime change war, not to support that. And now here, out of your own mouth, you're saying regime change. I mean, that's going to aggravate a lot of people as it is. But if you act on that too, folks, that could be a real problem. And I think that Vice President Vance, I think that Secretary Rubio and President Trump himself are handing every incentive to the Iranian side to act in ways that are antithetical to our interests by showing them there is a real danger here for the United States, for Trump. And if they take this action, and if they say, all right, all these other entities, Hezbollah, Hamas, Houthis, they've all endured a lot for long. The Vietnamese endured a lot for long. The Taliban endured a lot for long. But eventually they wore down the Americans. Don't you see this, folks? We provide every physical evidence in the world to tell Iran that their best course is not to seek peace. Their best course is not to have a negotiated settlement. It's not to pull in their tentacles. It's to expand the war and draw us deeper in. See, there are those that may say it's going to be bad for a while, but the only way we can get to a good place is to endure for a long time, because they can't. And they won't. And we, unfortunately, again, our actions have consequences whether we want them to or not. All these people I just showed you are saying we want to be true, but there's very little reason we've given the other side to do it, because they don't trust us. So they don't have any incentive to risk their lives in doing what we asked to do anyway. And there is motivation for them to act in ways that they think they can outlast us. That's one of the things that worries me the most. Our lack of building trust, and now that our actions make people afraid of us in a bad way, not respect but fear, because we're acting like an empire. And we're acting like we have no constraints and we don't need to keep our word, etc. That's being seen all around the world. And the seeds we're sowing today, just like the seeds we sowed in Vietnam, in Iraq, and in Afghanistan, and what we've done earlier in this war, what we did with Iran in 2018, all that stuff is coming to bear now. And if we keep going down this bad road, the seeds get deeper and they get more of them. And one day they may all sprout up in a way that is very, very bad for America. I hope we will get there, folks, but that's kind of where we are right now. And that's why I want to make sure I didn't want to wait until I got back, because especially before things happen now, we need to figure this out. What I hope happens is that enough people diplomatically, politically in the United States say this is not something we want, and that people start saying, let's apply the War Powers Act. Let's apply the Constitution. Let's get Congress involved, even though they should have already done it, and get this stuff started so that at least we can avoid the worst of the outcomes. Because if we don't, folks, this could get a lot worse for us. We'll stay on top of this, folks, and you can count on us here at Daniel Davis Deep Dive to keep you appraised of everything that's going on.